Okay, we will go ahead and get started here. Let's see. It's officially 6:33 p.m. And welcome to October's regular scheduled meeting for the Equity Council. We are glad to see everyone out, and we'll go ahead and get started. We have a pretty full agenda tonight and a couple presentations. So at this point, I'd like to ask Mr. Kamek if he would be willing to take roll call for us.
Abdul Muhammad.
Present.
I'll call Daniel Whitley, although I believe he's
Right.
resigned. Shayla Lynch.
Present.
Felicia Rout.
Present.
Craig Kamek present. Liliana Gomez. Linda George.
Present.
Kim Thompson.
Present.
Brett Nathaniel. Dominique Aubert.
Present.
And Lois Gillespie.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Kamek. Appreciate it. And we'll take a quick moment of silence, please. Thank you for that. Again, it's often time to take a quick second just to realize the many things going on in the world and the blessings that we do have and the opportunities to make change. And so I want to be mindful of that. Let's go ahead and read the mission statement. And I would ask, let's see here. Ms. Thompson, would you be willing to read the mission statement for us? It's at the top of the
Right here?
page.
It's up here on the projection as well, too.
Oh, sure. The mission of the Equity Council is to monitor and analyze equity issues, advise the Fayette County Board of Education, and advocate for achievement for all students.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Greatly appreciate it. And I should say that's Dr. Thompson. So proper, let's use pretty proper.
Correct.
Okay, and I'll call for approval of the minutes from our August 6, 12. We didn't approve minutes before. We were in a special session, but at this point, we would like to approve the minutes from our August 6th, 12th, and the 3rd, September the 3rd meetings.
I just have one edit to the August 12th minutes. On page 2, the longer paragraph under action item agenda 2, my first name is misspelled.
I typed it.
Yeah,
I outsourced
that's a
that
little
this-
different.
I outsourced that this week.
Right, we'll get, with spell check today, I'm quite sure it just,
Spell
yeah,
check,
yeah,
Been
possibly.
called worse, so it's okay.
Right,
I don't know what it
Okay.
says.
all right. Any other? All right, so I'll call for a motion to approve those 3 sets of minutes.
So moved with the correction.
So move with the correction.
If you say that in the streets, it'll sound right.
Is there a second?
Second.
And it's been properly second. Any other corrections, statements? Seeing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, and we will go to the reading of standards of practice agreement. And that would be stapled in our folders here. And last time we read the whole thing. I guess we'll do that this time. How we just set a new standard, right? Craig, you want to start us out? We started at as elected.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
As elected and appointed members of the Fayette County Board of Education Equity Council Committee, we accept the high honor and trust that has been placed in us to ensure that the students in this district receive the best education available anywhere in the United States of America. In accepting this role, we hold the pursuit of that goal as our sacred duty. To that end, we hereby commit to the following in the conduct of our business. We will
place the interest of students above all others in every decision that we make.
Uphold all applicable federal and state laws and regulations.
Abide by policies of the Fayette County Board of Education, the Equity Council bylaws, and work with fellow committee members to recommend changes to those policies as needed to improve student learning.
Maintain an unwavering focus on the achievement of all students, regardless of race, class, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, gender identity, socioeconomic status, special need, or English language proficiency.
Not use our positions for personal or partisan gain.
Model continuous learning and improvement in our roles as members of the advisory team.
Support a strategic plan for the district that clearly defines success and accountability for the board, the staff, and our students.
focus on the policy work of the board and monitor progress on the indicators of success in our strategic plan, leaving the day-to-day operation of the district to the superintendent and staff.
Base our recommendations upon available facts, advise our convictions, avoid bias, and uphold and support the decisions of the board once a decision is rendered by them.
Work to build trust between and among Equity Council committee members, board members, and the superintendent by treating everyone with dignity and respect, even in times of disagreement.
Maintain the confidentiality of potentially privileged information shared in collaboration with subcommittee members and district staff.
Recognize that authority rests only with the decisions made by the Fayette County Board of Education and make no independent commitments or take any independent actions that may compromise the Fayette County Public Schools Board of Education, Equity Council Committee, nor the work of district staff as a team.
Refer constituent complaints and concerns to the Equity Council Chair through the Equity Council Liaison, the Superintendent Designee, and then to the Superintendent.
Respect the leadership roles of the board chair, equity council committee chair, and superintendent.
We will maintain fidelity to these commitments and will be held accountable by our fellow Equity Council committee members shall any one of us fail to live up to these commitments. So thank you for reading the standard of practice that we abide by with the Equity Council. And it is 11 after, well, not 11 after we started, but it's actually 6:41, and we'll continue on here. So moving on in the agenda, discussion of December's election of Equity Council committee-based members. So in front of you, you see the information regarding the election, upcoming election. And if you specifically want to bring your attention to number 2, it says within the first week of October of each odd number year, the Office of Equity, School Support, and Community Engagement shall arrange for advertisement to appear in, and is highlighted, Lexington's largest circular/newspaper, and everything else. Actually, well, that's the point that we want to bring up. So we want to see if it made sense to, instead of amend that, we want to see if we can amend that and just make an amendment to advertise via Facebook, Twitter, all the social media platforms to try to, from a budgetary constraint, and then try to get it out and touch, because you can, it seems like more people are really looking at that more so than the newspapers today. So want to just get you all's thoughts on that.
What would be the avenue to reach people who aren't on social media?
Great question. So the only other avenues would just be kind of word of mouth, and then I don't know, would we be sending out anything via the school system at Fayette County Public Schools as well?
We post on our schools, on our district website as well. And that's pretty much the only other platform other than the newspaper. We spend about $300 for that ad annually. I'm not certain that that's the largest return on the investment, given the fact we do now today have social media, Twitter, Instagram, as well as a district website. It is, again, what was used in the past, and just wanted to bring it forth, given the fact that we have moved some progress, and some people still continue to use the circular as their means for communication. So it's, again, it was written in the bylaws years ago and brought forward in the bylaws current. So I thought it would certainly be prudent from my seat to ask this body if it was continue to be feasible to do that, since it is a fiscal impact on the district.
I have two comments. First, I would say $300 in a $400 million budget is minuscule. And secondly, the reason I applied is because I saw the ad in the newspaper. So that's pretty current.
All right, any other comments? Again, that was just a statement to be brought up. If nobody moves on it, it doesn't go anywhere. We just brought it up. And any other discussion or comments?
I would just say, from the perspective of a parent, we still have a lot of families, I'm not sure what the numbers are, who don't have access to the internet even.
Okay.
I do, and I'm not on social media by choice. So I'm just concerned that and I'm not sure that the printed circular, also,
Yeah.
there's probably people that does not reach. So I like the idea of still sending out old-fashioned emails, district-wide emails. I think a lot of people get those, but that,
Right.
it's a challenge because we want to be equitable in the way we advertise as well. But I heard about it word of mouth. I didn't see it in the newspaper, and I don't do social media.
And I'm not sure that all the people that we would want to reach on Facebook would necessarily be looking at the Fayette County Public School website, and I wouldn't know where else to post.
Okay.
My only suggestion is if for some reason we do not do the printed, I would suggest going to all of the branches of the public library. For those who don't have internet access, they potentially would go to the libraries for that internet access and see if we can do flyers or something on the bulletin boards or something there. I still think we should do the printed, but it's, $300, and I think we only have to do it once every 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So $150 a year, so it doesn't seem like it's that much.
Is there a way of doing the Facebook reaching out and the printing, and then keeping track of when we get applicants where they found out about us, so that we can see in the future which is most effective?
Absolutely. On the application, we can simply ask, how were you informed about the process? Yes.
So that might be a way that we can kind of get a sense of how people find out about us.
Great. So I brought this up, and it had done exactly what it was intended to do. Create the dialogue, particularly with the conversation around equity, diversity, and inclusion. Without the absence of this conversation, we will be saying we wonder if this is the best approach. And so you all laid out exactly what we need to hear, not just you all, what the public needs to hear as it relates to the work you do around this space. And we heard several different perspectives. So knowing that, there's no need to change the bylaws. And we'll continue to do business as we have with the inclusion of placing language in the public libraries. So we'll print the applications and place those there as well, and continue advertising based on the bylaw structure. So no need to even motion or change the way we've been doing business.
May I ask one further question?
Sure.
Related? Are the ads published in other languages?
We did it in Spanish one year, I think, but we certainly can take a look at the dominant languages that we
I know
typically translate for. And
I think
our
that's a
students.
great idea. I know the district has a lot of languages right now, several dozen, I think.
Is there a way of also forwarding this information to places like Global Lex and KRM, where there would be people who speak different languages that could be reached by flyers?
To Isabel Taylor and her group.
Right. So I know they post things and they distribute it, they put it as part of their newsletter, their monthly newsletter.
All right, great discussion there. Other questions as we look down through that, if you had a moment to look through, specifically number 3, it talks about having the opportunity to, if you had anyone that you would like to acknowledge, feel free to pass forward a name to the committee or to myself, and we can reach out to that person as well, since it is October's meeting. So give that some thought, whether you want to do it right now or even later on today.
And so we know we just elected 3 new seats, and fortunately and fortunately, those 3 new seats will need to submit an application as well. And so the advertisement, because you were filling a term, the remaining portion of an unexpired term, you would then reapply again. It's based on, I guess, whether or not your fellow sitting appointed members from the board, but that's the way to stagger. And so kind of give
So it's
you
like a 90-day test run or something like that.
so when you look at the
Interesting.
composition of the Equity Council, and I'll kind of do this real quick. It used to be a 15-member board with 2 members being appointed by each board member. So that made it 10 of those members came from the sitting Board of Education. The Equity Council started as a community-based organization. Those board members had to select members from a list of people, wherever they came from, that were based on their community. That made it more weighted from that side versus 6 elected members. So difficulty took place over years getting Equity Council member here to have a full quorum. Took 8 members basically to have a quorum. The board, we went through this process in January 2018, finally got the bylaws revised to the place that they are, agreed that we would reduce the body down to 11, 5 of those members being appointed by the board, and the 6 community-based members being from at-large elected. And so that's how we got where we are now. It allowed the body to operate more regularly because it didn't only require 6 members to be present for a quorum. And you all noticed the past couple of months we've been here with the quorum. So that's how we got here. So.
Point of clarification. So my understanding is that everyone that's on the right-hand side that says elected through December 2019 would be required to fill out a new application.
That is correct.
Okay. And not just the 3 new members.
The other 3 were, it was, I guess, an assumption of mine that the other 3 knew that they had been sitting and would fill out their term through December. So yes, all 6 members to the right of the agenda that has appointed through December 2019 would have to reapply.
And I need your application by midnight tonight. No, but please do take the time to apply. Obviously, it's nice to have a full committee, and because obviously we got to get some work done, and so please take the time to do that if you would.
When are the applications due?
So they will be, there's a deadline in the back of your packet.
I missed it.
The full bylaws are there for you. So the advertisement will run, I will put it in those locations that we spoke
I have to
of.
go out this month.
And they will run through the end of December, October 31st, 12 o'clock, I think, close of business is the way it runs. Can't remember off the top of my head today, but I'll get you the direct answer via email to the whole group. But it'll be close of business on the final date, October 31st, typically is the way it goes. So we'll run it from the first week to the end of October, close of business, and Article 4, I think, is where it's located.
On page 4, bylaws. Number 3.
Everybody there?
It'll be October 31st this month.
Yep.
All right, any other further questions?
Someone going to appoint someone to replace Daniel?
Yeah, so Daniel was appointed by a school board member, and so that school board member, be it Ray Daniels, would then reappoint someone else. Yeah.
Spoke
'cause
with
he's
Mr.
on the
Daniels
appointed
today
side.
about a couple of people that he may be interested in considering.
Yeah. So Daniel Whitley, if you didn't know, had tendered his resignation. He needed to do some other things there. And so we'll need to replace him. Again, he was appointed by our school board member there, so he'll have to be reappointed. That position will be reappointed. Okay. Let's keep moving here. We got some presentations to get to as well. And as from next on the agenda, Equity Council updates. Again, I don't have anything specific that need to go through. Just trying to be mindful that, again, as we go through and hear presentations tonight, kind of take that in, thinking about how does it impact the students in our school district, and then making sure that we, are always mindful that everyone should be given the same opportunities. I was walking around the room a little earlier today, looking at the paintings on the wall, and looking at the names of the students and the ages that had done those, and I was surprised to see anywhere from first grade, which I was blown away at that painting for a first grader, all the way through 12th grade, and thinking, what, and this last one specifically, looking at it, thinking oftentimes art is so different, and we're looking at the same picture, yet we may see different things. And equity can be somewhat the same way, that we're all looking at the same thing, but from a different perspective. So let's be mindful of that. Let's see here, visiting board member reflections. Stephanie, we have our board chair here, Stephanie
Yeah.
Spires. Go ahead.
So I'm, just to make sure you all know, so I'm the board chair, and each one of us on the board have different committees that we're assigned to. So this is my committee. But often other members come, but just as a point of clarification, so everybody knows, if more than 3 show up, then they have to leave. And if they show up and I'm last, they still have to leave. We've been trying to really, because this committee is one that really interests everybody, and so sometimes this is the committee we run into trouble with, where we all 5 show up and we're like, oh wait, I'm not supposed to be here. But anyway, so a couple of things I wanted to just kind of highlight. And I know a few of us talked about before the meeting about kind of how committee is an extension of the board and is appointed by the board. And so it's important to recognize that this committee isn't involved in the day-to-day operations. And I know there's been some challenges over the last little bit. If you want a new job, this is apparently the board to be on, because everyone keeps getting promoted and then they've had to roll off, and we've had some struggles with that this past year. But when we were going over, we had the superintendent's review a couple weeks ago, and we really used the annual report and the blueprint for success to do that. And we really got talking in it about how the Equity Council really drove a lot of the stuff that is in the blueprint for success. And I don't know that it's hard, because sometimes you don't see your work or you don't realize, but really the research and the data and the conversations that have come out of this are what are really built into our implementation when we look at strategic policies and stuff. And so I want to just make sure, because I think there's this thought of, well, how is our information used? And when it's used right, and how it's been used in the past, and how I think it should be used in the future, is to really drive, you guys provide us with this information, this knowledge, and this research, and we all look at it together and we identify ways to support. A couple quick things I want to say. Also, out of the superintendent's review, one thing that I noted, and I spoke about this at our school board meeting last week, and the other board members had noted, is that as a district, we are doing well hiring diverse staff. And if you even look at the new mental health professionals that we hired, and which is a pool that some would argue is kind of a smaller pool of of professionals, we got a very diverse staff. So when the district is making the hires, the staff is diverse. But what we're seeing is when we get into our schools, there is still not the diverse schools that we realize that we are a majority minority population, and our schools do not, administrations and staffs don't reflect that. And so this board is committed, and that's one thing that we came out of it, is that we want to support the superintendent any way that we can and continue to drive that this is a priority for this board, and this is something that we are concerned about and we care with, and we recognize that we have some limitations because of the way hiring happens at the school level with the SBDMs and the principals. And there are some great things that have been going on in the district as far as increasing the applicant pool and doing, but we've got to, within the way the law allows us, to figure out how to kind of keep pushing that message down and letting, educating the SBDMs, educating our parents in our schools, and realizing that this is a priority for our community. So I wanted to kind of share that with you all, since some of you all were at the board meeting, but not all of you, and I wanted to just kind of reiterate that that is something that this board is committed to. And we also noted that with the superintendent, that, he alone can't do it, but he has our support. And the last thing, as you all know, school data came out today, and it showed some really interesting things. So first of all, last year we had 7 comprehensive support and interventions schools, which are CSI schools, and CSI schools are considered the bottom 5% in the state. Now, I do not like ranking schools, because if you rank a school, someone's always going to be on the bottom. And, and they're not apple. I mean, it's like ranking apple, orange, banana. None of them are the same. I hate rankings, but that's me. But then regardless, they got ranked. But I think it's interesting that a district, our district has a significant 6% of the population of the state. So you would think that we would have more than just one CSI school. So I think what this is showing today, it showed that we are making some great strides in the right direction. That are some of the things we implemented with our turnaround plans, with our district-wide curriculum. Some of these things are really working. And so what I think my takeaway, and maybe this is not everyone's takeaway, is we are doing some really good things, and it is not the time to halt. It's time to keep the train moving forward and keep going towards the goal. And we still have a lot of work to do, and we need to head in that direction. And, and I will echo to you what I've been echoing to everyone is, again, we should not be comparing school to school to school, but we should be looking at each individual school and saying, what did this school do well? Where does this school need improvement? How can I be a part of that improvement? And what I've been telling people is, the same thing I echo to all of you all, getting involved. I mean, you guys are here, but if people need to know how to get involved or get plugged in, they can call and do Give 10, or we can put them in Real Men Read, or we have all these opportunities to get individuals in the community plugged in. But yes, so if anybody has questions about that, and I think we may even be diving into that a little bit more here in a minute. I don't know. So, but I just wanted to kind of say that, we were pleasantly, as much as I don't like data, pleasantly surprised, I guess, if we had to have data. I think it echoes that we're moving in the right direction as a district. So those are my comments.
All right. Questions? You said we had 7.
We had 7 and we only have 1.
And we only have 1 now. Okay.
I sent out an email late this afternoon that, it was a very long email, but it detailed everything, and it was very good and very informative email. And like she said, it showed how much, or the improvement that we've made over the past year, and hopefully we will continue on the current.
Yeah.
Very good email.
That's awesome. Do you know how that compares against this other, like, JCPC?
They have, I don't know, because I haven't
Not sure.
dove into it.
I know it just came out today, so hard to.
I don't know.
Our numbers were better than the state average, though.
The state
Yes,
average
we are
was.
better than the state
On a couple
average.
of things.
So I've got the superintendent's press conference and press release queued up. If you all want to listen to portions of it, that will give you a summary of some of the questions that we just talked about. Also, we have a presentation from Sherry Heisey, our district associate director for assessment literacy. In essence, Ms. Heisey is responsible for the data across the district, sharing that data, school report cards, informing us of assessment schedules, timelines, things, all the stuff around assessments. Ms. Heisey is responsible for. She's on the agenda to give us an update and an overview. But if you are interested, I can queue up some of the information because it is a deeper dive in his press. I don't know if you all saw it on, it was released, I guess, this morning, which gives a really good snapshot of the work that's been done in the district. So,
Is it possible to send us a link to that?
absolutely,
website.
it is.
It's on the
So,
website? Okay, I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
So-
excellent. So,
That's a good idea. Send the link
whatever
out.
behooves
Nice.
this group, we can move forward on the agenda as it approaches 7:15.
Question quickly. So when a school goes into CSI, that means SBDM has no more power, right?
That's correct.
Superintendent becomes, yeah,
So-
SBM.
Superintendent Kalk gets to hire and fire at will.
That's a broad statement, and that's not how he exercises his authority. Yeah, so it's just for the public, or you have to listen. That's not
Okay,
exactly
sorry.
how it
Thank you
works.
for- thank
If
you
it
for-
wasn't him, he could do that, but
Could.
that is not what has happened.
Good.
There are some clearly defined protocols in statute that tells the district the steps needed to transform a school's authority once they become CSI status. That is done through advisory boards and transformational teams and transformational plans. All of that is written into statute and regulation. So it's not arbitrary that the superintendent exercises his authority once they become CSI. You have to go through the steps in the statute and administrative regulation.
I think it's important to note, just on the 7 schools we had last year, we did 7 different turnaround plans. It's not one size fits all. Going back to my apples, bananas, oranges, like, one school had a really high minority population. 2 schools had really high homeless populations. And so it was, what do these schools need? And so we spent most of April in here with each other, because that was the other thing. The state released it and said we had 4 weeks to turn around, to submit our turnaround plans, but we had 30 days to submit our turnaround plans, but 1 week is spring break, and they gave it to us like the day before spring break, so we really had 21 days to do 7 plans.
And contract independent auditors who had to come in. and give us assessment.
So, I won't
So
go
April,
there.
we
I'll
were
get
here
in
every
trouble.
night, if you want to follow up, but yes, so I think, but that is important to say, because it isn't just one size fits all. And I know we did talk about the one school, did have a high staff turnover, we talked about that.
And then likely in both William Wells and Harrison, probably 80 to 90% staff transformation in those schools because those were the 2 CSI. They weren't the only 2, but they were deemed the 2 Promise Academy schools that came out of the transformational plan. And so therefore, the superintendent exercised the authority to create some human capital management in those spaces, which resulted in people having to reapply for their jobs, all right?
Good. Yeah, go ahead.
So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I mean, thanks for the clarification. I believed and knew all of that, but since this is the first year that data comparing apples and oranges and bananas and whatever relative to race and poverty and all that stuff was collected, and some of the top performing like 5-star schools did not fare so well when it came down to when it was measured, when compared against white kids and African American, like ethnic diversity, or particulars at least. Is there anything that, has the Pritchard Committee spoken into or given laws for that? Like, I mean, if you don't perform well at the bottom 5%, there's protocols. But if you don't perform well with this precious segment in a high-performing school, we're limited by the SBDM, correct?
Well, it's, the SBDM is a combination of stakeholders.
And the principal and who he or she hires and
So,
other
so
stuff.
what-
And what they care about, maybe.
here's what I would ask us to do is pause and allow Ms. Heisey, when she comes up, to give us a 30,000-foot view that'll also give us some, that will inform our questions after she does that. Because what she will share will probably invoke some questions, but it also inform you of some of the questions that you're already asking.
All right.
But you are heading down, like, I know where you're going.
And so you're going to use, you'll be able to use the right terminology after she finishes, yeah.
I will take notes.
All right, well, with that being said, and the superintendent's not here, we'll skip through that and go right to subcommittee reports and start with excellent student opportunities. And Ms. Heiss, if you would like to take the mic there, we're anxious to hear from you.
I have a handout for you that we shared with the media that also includes the press release. So I want to make that available to you. Thank you, sir.
Yes, more, I'll hand those out. Yeah, go ahead.
I got it. I think I counted out enough for this side. If not, I have some more. Thank you for the opportunity to share this information. I think,
And Ms. Heiss, I'm
Already.
sorry, excuse me one moment. So you're being videotaped,
okay.
and the mic, you, well, I'll have to ask you to speak into the mic there, so no one will know what you're saying at home.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you. So in your information, like I said, you have the press release. Also, you have the accountability information regarding the schools, their stars, and if they had a significant gap, and if their star situation was lowered based on that. But what I'd like to do, with your permission, is to go through an overview of the results for the district, and then field questions, and if I need to elaborate more, or if you need more information or more charts and graphs, I'll be happy to share those with you. Just wanted to remind everyone that our mission statement has guided all of our work regarding our data analysis, our discussions. So it will be very evident in these results that the mission has truly driven this process of improvement. Just real briefly to explain the system as it stands, I know you've probably heard a lot, but this is kind of narrowing it down to the big picture. You have a star rating that is based upon performance levels in regards to the standards and indicators for proficiency, separate academic indicator, growth, transition readiness, and graduation rate. The elementary, middle, and high have proficiency indicator scores. The elementary, middle, and high also have separate academic indicator scores, which are science, social studies, and writing. The reading and math constitutes the proficiency. Then you have the growth scores that are only in elementary and middle, and the child is compared to themselves. It's a measure of the individual student's growth from one year to the next. The transition readiness is high schools only. It consists of academic and career readiness, which has a multitude of pathways to receive the readiness. Then you have the graduation rate, which is high school only. And it's based upon the entry of ninth graders, and out of those ninth graders, how many actually graduated over a 4 or 5 year period. So the school is compared to the school in regards to a lot of the ratings. So it's the school's growth and the school's improvements over time in several of the indicators. In proficiency and separate academic indicator, it is based upon the same scores throughout, same opportunities throughout the state of receiving a novice, apprentice, proficient, or distinguished. They receive scores based on those numbers, and then that gives them their overall score. Now, the star rating has gotten a lot of attention because it seems to imply the ranking. The federal classification does include a a caveat, if you will, of being in the bottom 5%. That is based on every student succeeds at it, and it's a requirement of the federal government that we have to report that. The state tried to avoid that, and the federal government came back and said, no, you have to identify what we call comprehensive school improvement and additional targeted school improvement, ATSI. So this year, there's classifications of CSI and ATSI that are federal classifications. The star rating is based upon their performance in each one of those indicators. The star rating is impacted by the gap, which is not reported in the overall accountability. So before we get too lost on that, do you have questions about that part, as I had explained it?
I have a question. How's growth measured?
Growth is measured if a student in 2018 was an apprentice student, and in 2019 that same student became proficient, then they have a growth score of 150 points.
Okay.
So the student is compared to themselves in the growth. Then once all of those are calculated, then you divide that by the number of students tested, or student scores. Now this year in reading, we included English learners, plus the English learners' growth scores were included in the reading growth score. So that made it a little bit different, but it turned out, well, I don't want to blow everything yet.
How much does the growth score count in the overall score?
The growth score and the proficiency score are weighted the same. So and I didn't put the growth value, the weighted scores in there, but it's approximately, in elementary, it's approximately 36% for the proficiency score, and the same for the growth score. And then the separate academic indicator, which is science, social studies, and writing, that has a little different weight. The numbers that I'm going to talk to you about today aren't the weighted scores, because the weighted scores make it very challenging to compare. The weighted scores changes to determine if we made improvement from 2018 to 2019, because we didn't weight scores last year. We only weighted them this year. So, but that only factors into the overall accountability score. It does not factor into the proficiency and so forth.
When she says "we," she's talking about the Kentucky Department of Education.
And
Yes,
the
I know.
Kentucky.
I
I'm
understand
talking
this.
about just Kentucky. I'm just
Well,
saying.
thanks, because I was wondering if that was about
No,
to
no,
say.
no, I
is
knew,
that-
because I
okay.
was just trying to figure out how these schools with fives are getting fives year after, I mean, if we were to keep the same grading system, which I know changes every other year, which also makes it kind of difficult.
Yes.
And I've got my own thoughts as to why that happens, but I'm just trying to figure out how a school that had a 5 last year can have a 5 this year when there's not going to be that much growth. They're going to be stagnant or a very little growth. We've already got students who are achieving this high. How are you measuring their growth, so to speak? Like, it's easier with a student who starts off as novice and moves up. They've clearly have shown some growth. If you've got a student that's already up here, there's only so much room to grow. And I feel like schools who have students that are down here that are actually doing some work and growing those students are being penalized because those students are starting off so far at the bottom anyway.
Let me, if you don't mind, if I can address that when I get to the growth section, then I can probably maybe put it in context. The 5-star system this is the first year for the 5-star system. Last year, all we had were indicators for proficiency, separate academic indicator, growth, transition readiness, and graduation rate. We didn't have an overall score last year. They wanted to avoid that at all costs, and they did. So all we had reportable were those indicators. So what most districts did, because they wanted to see some level of improvement from one year to the next, most districts created their own system of trying to determine whether there was growth or not. Unfortunately, the scoring was entirely different from 2017 17-18 and 2018-19. I mean, 2016-17 and 2017-18. So this is like 2 years of comparable data now, where it hadn't been because of all the changes. But I do want to share some really good news with you and some insights. For the 5 stars, we have 3 schools that are 5 stars across our district. We have 15 schools that are 4 stars. And as you can see on down, 3 3-star schools or 18 3-star schools and 15 2-stars and 1 4-star. 1 star is 4 schools. I do want to point out that the achievement gap is the only thing that could lower a star rating. And 2 of our elementary schools were 5-star schools that they're due to a gap, what they consider a significant gap, were lowered to a 4-star. 1 of our middle schools that would have been a 5-star school, their star rating lowered to a 4-star. And then 2 of our high schools were 4 stars and were lowered to a 3-star due to significant gap. That's impressive. That is. That's impressive for the first time for this to ever have occurred with a district this size. I know people want to focus on the 1 and 2-star and the 19 schools there. I think if you really dig into the data, then you see the impact that those 3, 4, and 5-star schools have across all demographic groups. And they're high performing in multiple areas. But I'll get to that also in just a second, kind of give you a location to go and look for yourself, and so you can see that.
Sheriff, I'll mention here just as a group, when we get past this week and this month, this is where we probably want to start doing some become educational researchers and digging into, even though the stars are what they are, they have a real concrete purpose for why they were reduced and what student groups were impacted. And so we'll hear presentations from some of the subcommittees who will focus on areas of some analysis that they've done around student groups that could have caused the school to lose a star. So was it African American? Was it ESL? Was it special ed? Was it this? Now, Ms. Routh mentioned how you have these 5-star schools every year, and typically you'll see homogeneous populations in those schools where it does not change. And that's where the accountability system, as much as people talk about the 5-star system, it makes you have conversation about those schools. For instance, if you don't have, if you got a segregated school system and you introduce a student group or a student population, what happens to the teaching and learning for that group? Will it be at the same level of the same, and will the school maintain that same level? And what services are you putting in place? So that's where this group again says, okay, let's unpack this a little bit and start asking questions. And it gets beyond the district now into schools, because it will not be specific to a disparity across the district, because you will see success overall, but some schools have some disparities. So that's the work, the analysis that this group would start digging in as we move into December and January.
And I concur. Speaking from being a former principal in this district in a diverse middle school, was well aware of those that seemed to be performing higher than our school, but yet didn't have the diversity of our school. And now that my former middle school is now one of the top performing middle schools. So they fought through that, and it's part of the digging into the data and understanding how to support students and move forward. So I think that is very much a value added by this committee, definitely. And of course, on this one, as I said, out of those 9 schools, there were, we had 5 of those 9 schools that were pretty high, that were at the highest rate of 4 and 5, that were reduced to the star. So that is important to note, and those principals are already having a lot of conversation around what just happened, because it is something that it is meant As the superintendent said yesterday, it is meant to bring conversation to that subject of our achievement gaps. So you have, I was going to do a big splash here, but you know, we had 7 CSI schools and 25 TSI schools in 2018 at the end of the accountability. This year, we have 1 CSI school and 1 ATSI school. So that means we have no new CSI schools, which is a very, very, very good news. That's exciting. The district performance is above the state average at each one of those levels, elementary, middle, and high. Our proficiency indicators in reading and math are performing above the state average. Actually, above the state average. In their separate academic indicator, which is science, social studies, and writing, we are performing above the state average in elementary and middle. And in our growth indicator, which is only elementary and middle, in reading and math, we are performing above the state average. Also, our overall scores in elementary and middle are above the state average. So that speaks highly, too, of the work that has been in play.
Where are those numbers, though? When you say above the state average, what is the state average and what is Fayette County Schools? That in our
Well,
packet?
I have several handouts, so I
Okay,
I
okay.
don't mind a bit to put this
Is it
on one
online?
sheet, but it's online.
Okay.
It's on the school report card, which I'm going to
Okay.
show you a glimpse of,
Okay.
that you can find this information. But if you want it in a table form, I have no problem making that available. This is a glimpse of the school report card, which can be found at the Kentucky Department of Education website. And it also will be available on our website. A link on our website will be made available so that you can click on this and click on the link, and it will take you to the school report card landing page, where you can type in Fayette County or any school, and it will bring up this school. You will have a cover sheet that will provide the STAR system and then an explanation of the STAR system. Provides you additional details on the accountability. So each one of these indicators, this is where the stars came into play. Even though this is growth, it still gives you an idea. We had, each indicator will have a very low, low, medium, high, or very high indicator. So you'll have like a little bar there that's color-coded to show you where we are, where our district is in regards to where we are to the state, and then the same thing for the schools, the district, the state comparisons. And it will be either the red, the orange, the green, the blue, so forth. So in this case, this is, even though this is the growth indicator that I showed you an example of, because it's important also to see that the district's growth in in elementary and middle were above the state. And even though we were at the middle level, you can see we still outperformed the state on growth. So our students, as you had mentioned, our students are growing. And they're growing at a little faster rate than any other district in the state. So that is a yay. But this will be linked on our website so that you can have quick access to this. It just became available today, just after midnight.
It's a good thing we had this meeting today.
I know. Hot off the press. I know this is something that is on everyone's mind. We want to make a distinction and just to kind of emphasize the degree of thought that our superintendent puts into the way he approaches everything. There is two different ways to look at the gap groups. One is, this is what's reported on the school report card. This is what qualifies as a significant gap in as much as it impacts the star rating. So for us and Fayette County, at the elementary school level, we have no significant achievement gaps. Repeat that. At the elementary level, we have no significant achievement gaps. That's amazing. Then at the middle school level, the disability is out of 9 groups, the disability is the significant achievement gap. Students with disability with IEPs, excuse me. Then at the high school level, African American and students with disabilities with IEPs. Those are the really two groups of students that have shown a significant enough gap at the district level. That is what is reported. But our superintendent, as you all probably well know, is not satisfied with talking about the surface. So as we continue to dive deeper, we realized that there are also some gaps that need to be addressed between English learners and non-English learners. Also, gifted and talented and non-gifted and talented at the middle school level. Still, at the elementary, there were no significant gaps.
When you say no significant gaps, so this middle column,
Is considered a significant gap.
but there's elementary schools that have significant,
As a district.
you're talking at
Yes,
cumulative.
yes,
Okay.
cumulative,
Okay.
yes. Yes, you're right. At some of our schools, yes.
When you
but-
put it all together, it
But when you
doesn't,
put it all together.
not significant.
Not significant. Thank you for clarifying that, because you have the breakdown by schools.
Yeah.
Then on our high schools, the English learner, non-English learner, and gifted and talented and non-gifted and talented. So this was important to note because services have been aligned to support these areas, and significant interest has been put into making sure that we are seeing improvement here. I thought this was good to note because it's not just settling for it, it's going above and beyond. It truly meant to improvement for all students.
So these gaps suggest that over time, gaps appear and then increase?
There,
Is this data too early to track that?
no.
Or is that something we've been seeing, that as kids move into the middle school, something happens?
Right, it's been, the trend data has been there, been evident enough, simply from just looking at novice, apprentice, proficient, distinguished, regardless of how it's scored. That data tells us, has been informing us that over the years, this is something that has had to be addressed several years ago. So when what we're seeing is a result of what was put into play 3 to 4 years ago.
Okay.
Because it's not happening at the elementary. And that is typical. When an initiative or an improvement initiative has been put into place, you should see the first benefits starting from the elementary program. Everywhere else, it's like we're trying to stop things from happening. But at the elementary level, when you're starting to see the results like this, which is typical of any type of an improvement initiative, it takes 3 to 5 years to see results. So now that you're seeing the results at the elementary school, it will continue to feed forward.
Good.
And I'll say this, as it relates to the conversation, circa 1989, and go back 9 superintendents probably at least, this conversation was not being had internally. And so that drove the, at that time, agency executive forum to bring a charge to the superintendent then, Ronald Walton, to question what was the district doing to address the needs of all students. Think about that. That was the beginning of the Equity Council. And so circa 2015, we hired Superintendent Emmanuel Kalk, and I was working in the district when he was hired. And this is my 28th year in education. But we were not getting the same collaboration and shared work from the community and from within the district because we didn't have a strategic plan. And so when we had our earlier conversation prior to the start of the meeting, that strategic plan is an intentional focus on how do we drill down and create strategies and activities around achievement gaps, at-risk student populations, kindergarten readiness. So I say that to say to put this group in context to the work that was done then for when you start thinking about asking the compelling whys into those schools that look like they're top performing every year, but what's the diversity in them and why isn't there diversity? All of those things become the work of this group as we look at the data.
I had a question about the middle and high schools having gaps between the gifted and talented and non-gifted and talented. And obviously those start in 4th grade, right? So has there been any tracking of the gaps in the primary talent pool and non-primary talent pool?
Not to my knowledge, but at the same time, I'm not aware of it. I know that the data is being collected, and I think that this has created an awareness towards a more clarity on what that data actually means. And I'm a brand new Associate Director of Assessment Literacy. This is a new department, and part of the reason for this department now is just what you're saying. Is to look at all of the data, not just the K-Prep data, but to look at this in a full picture. And that's what our department is going to bring to the table. But as far as the data being collected, absolutely. I don't think until there really had to be on, and to be completely transparent, the state accountability system, and I'm not pissing this off on the state accountability system did not provide adequate reporting of gifted and talented on a consistent basis to even bring that awareness to the table. What most people were doing and is looking at, are they maintaining, if they are gifted and talented academically, are they maintaining proficient, distinguished level of performance? And so that's mainly been at the school level. The schools have been tracking to make sure that their GT population is not sliding, especially in the middle and the high school. So I know that has been done, but as far as a district level view of that, I'm not aware of that tracking because there's not been a method set up for that to happen. It's through this new reporting process, now we actually have a way to truly compare the two different groups, because our gifted and talented are so high performing, but yet we don't want to say if you're gifted and talented, you're going to be up here, and if you're not, you're going to be in the middle of the road. We don't want that either.
So I'm going to share this link with you all after the meeting's over, which is a report that was done comparing Jefferson County Public Schools and Fayette County Public Schools on our gifted and talented programs and how they compare. But without us taking a deep dive, I just want to, and without us having to read the article, I'll show you a graph that shows us in comparison to Jefferson and the number of identified students, and that's us in blue. Now, you're talking about a school district that's 100-some thousand students versus ours being 42,000, and the rate at which we identify gifted and talented students. To take a deeper dive, but just to get it in context, because we did do a lot of work as a result of the input that we got from the forums that we were talking about, and then the strategies and activities from the strategic plan to change how we were allocating, as well as our teacher-to-student ratios, as well as shifting how we were identifying gifted and talented in our district about 3 years ago. But this was a report that's in the Courier Journal that I'll share with you, because there is some narrative to it, to how what they do is different than what we do and how we're yielding these results. I just wanted to cue that up for you. All right. Sorry for getting you off pace there. See if we
Any other questions? Did that address your original thought, Pat? Okay, good.
All right. Any other questions?
I was just going to add, did you want me to put this with the state?
I can look it up online.
Okay.
Thank
I
you.
did have a question. So the ATSI schools, I mean, the one that's remaining,
Yes.
I just looked at the Department of Education website, and I need some help translating probably. But
Here to help.
I think it says, I think the way I read it is, the Kentucky Department of Education will not identify any new schools for ATSI in fall 2019.
Correct.
KDE anticipates identifying the second round of new ATSI schools in fall of 2021. So,
Because of the federal government's requirements. Because initially, and spent a lot of time on the road, so to speak, working with their schools and understanding this accountability system. On September 13th, I had made my last presentation, just a little sidebar, my last presentation, which was about the 10th or 12th one. And then on September the 16th, the commissioner sent out a message saying that something has changed. So what we found is that the federal government would not approve the definition of targeted support and improvement as it was written in Kentucky's plan. So Kentucky, KDE had to resubmit their plan, and because their plan was aligned to the Kentucky regulations that were not aligned to Every Student Succeeds Act, they had to put the TSI on hold. But the ATSI, which was really TSI 2, anyway, it was already there in regulation, and it already met Every Student Succeeds Act, so they reclassified it, so to speak, as ATSI to meet the federal government requirements.
And so when you think about TSI, where you then get to these student groups that that reflect the 5-star. So if you were a TSI school, you became a TSI school because of student population groups that you were not having high growth or proficiency, et cetera. And so that really was the achievement gap, the segregation.
They were falling in the bottom 5% of all Kentucky scores, and that is, that comes out of the meeting the federal requirements.
right. No, that's very helpful. But so I guess my question then is, we couldn't add any more anyway, right? I mean, we couldn't have added, like, there's no new, but we couldn't have, right? Because they wouldn't, am I reading that right?
If you're
We
questioning.
could exit, but we
Yes.
couldn't add any more.
Because they did not qualify under that definition.
But you can use a star, right? So you can lose a star.
Yeah, the stars are killer. That's helpful.
And the 4 and 5-star schools are the ones that lose a star.
Yeah, which is where yeah, that's good.
That help?
I already noted the asterisks. That's
Okay.
what matters.
Just,
I think,
yeah. Thank you, Ms. Heiss, for the presentation. Really appreciate that. And very, very good information and good news, and still some work to do. Next up on the agenda would be excellent relationships, and we have Miranda Scully, the district base coordinator. Is Katie here as well? Fitzpatrick, is she going to be? All right. Oh, they're sharing a mic. All right, there you go.
Is that okay?
Absolutely, go for it.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Miranda Scully. I'm the District Coordinator for Family and Community Engagement.
I'm Kate Fitzgerald. I'm the college and career coach at Lafayette High School.
And Mr. Thompson's going to pull up a video that we've been working on. Just to give you a little background, we have been working together, Family Community Engagement, along with the college and career coaches.
Hi, I'm Trey Sims, your guide on scoring.
Pause. To increase awareness of FAFSA completion, which launched today, And so one thing you'll find is the end product of video of all the college and career coaches, in addition to representative from Kia. And then we'll talk about some additional efforts that we've been working on as just the start of a way to increase awareness and to get additional community support, including post-secondary partners around the table towards FAFSA completion.
And I'm going to insert this. Stephanie's here, the board chair. A couple of weeks ago, board member Will Nash did a presentation at the planning meeting, and his focus was on the FAFSA. And he wanted to explore and begin exploratory conversation about what the district was doing to increase the number of students who, one, completed it, who started the application and completed the application. And so myself, chief of high schools, and another another school director provided some insight into what we were currently doing. What we found was that there were some opportunities for us to increase those numbers. And so one of the charges that came out of that meeting was to bring to you all discussion around the FAFSA, and particularly to do some more deeper dives into what the district could do as a recommendation potentially, not necessarily that we're not doing enough, but look into policy changes. Some states have explored making the FAFSA a requirement for graduation and all this other stuff. We're going to share, and before you go that far, we'll bring to you some information. I was at Kentucky State University from February to August. Financial aid, enrollment, bursar, registrar, all those things were units that reported to me. The FAFSA was one of the most complex pieces to getting a student enrolled into the university. It was easy for us to recruit them, easy for us to offer a scholarship. If they had not completed the FAFSA, it stopped their enrollment process. That becomes a parent issue. So what we've done is explore how can we best support parents in helping them understand their role in getting that done. So we're right at this point now, and they're going to catch us up to what the district has been doing and what we're doing going forward.
Well, and I want to interject too. One thing that I found having a senior last year was that a lot of students had done it and then had to do it again. And that was like a disconnect. And so I know when I took my daughter to EKU for her orientation, and I had kept nagging her too because she was being independent and was like, I don't need your help. And I kept being like, have you done the new one? Have you done the new one? And so when we went in the office and asked, and what we had found is that many of the students had come that day had not done the newest FAFSA. So it's even like a disconnect even with all these parents, like talking to EKU's administration, which just, yes, this is a very common problem is maybe the students do it at one point and then they don't do the next, like do it again. Time. And so just still having that disconnect, and and you have these independent seniors who don't necessarily think their parents know anything.
And that's been some of the efforts since last year and this year, working with the college and career coaches have been intentional about increasing the availability of support for it not being just during school hours, but ensuring that there's evening hours and that we have weekend opportunities as well. So students may get help during the day, but then also providing that opportunity for families to come
at night.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So without any further ado.
And just real quick, very grateful that we have Robert Lewis, who was able to support in creating this video. So shout out to Robert.
Financial aid through the FAFSA. What is FAFSA?
Let's back up.
Sims, your guide on scoring financial aid through the FAFSA. What is FAFSA? Here are a few of our FCPS partners to help you with funding your future.
Thanks, Trey. Hi, I'm Monica Jones from Frederick Douglass High School. I'm Brandy Ashford from Bryan Station High School.
Hi, I'm Vince Bingham with Henry Clay High School.
I'm Kate Fitzgerald from Lafayette. Hi, I'm Pam Bates from Paul Lawrence Dunbar. And I'm Charlize Lewis from Tates Creek High School. So, what is FAFSA? It's the free application for federal student aid. It's an online form seniors need to fill out so that you can get the money you need to pay for college.
Remember, there is no cost to complete the application.
FAFSA is the gateway to funding your education through scholarships, federal grants, and student loans.
So apply as soon as possible to ensure you get the maximum amount available. Your school's college and career coach can answer any questions. You can also come to our FAFSA Frenzy workshops. Just visit fcps.net/FAFSA for details.
Remember, FAFSA is free.
So, what is FAFSA? Partners, free,
Application for
federal, student aid.
That went global today.
Oh, yeah.
Global.
Yeah,
Global. Facebook is global and YouTube is too.
So this is one effort to extend our reach in informing families and community about the October 1st being able to complete the FAFSA, and also is bringing us into the world of social media and using that platform to be able to share information. And then, Mr. Thompson, if you're able to go to that FAFSA website, you could also see one location that allows families to go, and they can see all the opportunities throughout the district in order to get support for FAFSA completion. Yes.
So we do have 24 events that are scheduled across the district, and three or four are actually outside of the school. So at BCTC, their Festival de Futuros, at Eastside Library, at Northside Library, and then at the Woodhill Community Center. And we're still working on a location, hopefully Carnegie Center and the Beaumont Library branch.
This is the website where Ms. Scully's mentioning. You'll see all the information related to mark your calendars, the events for each high school. And we were at Kentucky State today, actually, and the fact that a couple of units reported to me, when I was on that side of the table, we had talked about what can we do as a university to come back into K-12 to increase this work. And so then I came back on this side of the table, and we started talking about what can we do to partner with universities. So we've got FAMU coming up, and you've got this sitting at your side, which is our Family University, November 9th. But we talked with the director and assistant director of financial aid about coming to partner with us at this event to inform families and students on the intricate details of the FAFSA from their lens. And so they're going to help educate and train and support our event going forward.
Great. I'm going to have to go home and give my wife a hug for the many times I heard her on my two kids talking about FAFSA. I didn't know what she was talking about. But every year I heard her, did you do FAFSA? Did you do FAFSA? And they was going back and forth, and they got done. But yeah, thanks for the work that you do. But that's kind of important. As I looked at that video, and I'm thinking, yeah, you know, how many fathers out there like me that just wasn't part of that. I was at home and I heard my wife, but I wasn't really engaged in that. And maybe if I had to, because she wasn't there, maybe I would have gotten engaged.
You're
But
engaged because you use your income.
well, yeah. But at the end of the day, you know, it's like, how many times does a teenager that knows everything, right, show up and I got this, and then they don't really have it.
So
right?
to your point, socioeconomics become the barrier. And again, the students that I dealt with at Kentucky State, majority of them were first-generation college students. I was a first-generation college student. I filled out my own FAFSA, and I had to get the information from my mom, and that's still the case. We have students that get delayed because they cannot get their parents to sit down, or a parent that they may be living with, or they're unaccompanied youth, homeless, and can't get that information. So that's work that we began to how can we remove those barriers. That's work that we're beginning to work on this side now that I've had that experience for how can we take our McKinley-Vento kids that do not have these supports and mitigate those and remove those barriers to get those things in place. So this is the work that's been done.
And the last thing I'll mention too is that this is just one thing that the college and career coaches that they do. And so we want families to be familiar with who they are and their faces and the support that they provide. You notice that this does not have a date on it. So even though we're talking October 1st with awareness, there's still work that will be done around FAFSA completion all the way through students understating their student aid report and award packages. So just provide that support for students as they navigate the cost of college and paying for it.
Is this a form that could be filled out in the classroom, or do they have to have financial information from their parents that, I mean, do they have to have actual copies of tax returns?
Yes, they usually do have to have their family's tax returns. They can upload it now from the IRS. So sometimes students will actually call their family, get their information over the phone, and be able to do it in classrooms. For instance, since today opened up, our co-op teacher had all of his students beginning their FAFSA form. So they can at least create their FSA ID and then fill out as much as they can. And it's best if they do have somebody look over it again. I had several students last year who weren't awarded aid that thought they would get aid, and it turned out they had put in their parents' financial information twice, so under the parents and under the students' financial information. So it looked like they had double the money and plenty of money to pay for college. Also, the way I've structured at least our FAFSA workshops at Lafayette is that we have the student session during the day first, and then a week or 2 weeks later, we have an evening session available for the families. So that way, the students can take it home, have time to plan to come back with their families and their information. If they're not able to complete it on their own, they can come back and ask questions.
Can I ask, since this is a new initiative, what's the data from last year? Do we know how many students were unable to complete it, and where are we starting?
So that's a great question. The only report that we've had access to was a FAFSA completion report, and the only people that it lists are those who started the report. So that's all that we really had to go on. I was actually looped into an email conversation with Will Nash about that fact. And so I think he's working with our data people on a report that we can have that's all of our graduating seniors, or the cohort that should be graduating. So some of them will be listed as freshmen, sophomore, juniors, seniors, but they're going to graduate this year. So we'll have those students and be able to reach out to them throughout the year.
So we'll be able to see if there's certain patterns, what demographics
Right.
or areas.
Right. And like last year, I was able to look, it would say someone hadn't completed the FAFSA. The report wasn't real time. It was old. So I would, take the time and call them out of class. They would come out of class and they'd say, well, I've finished that. We finished it at home. Several of them hadn't completed it, so it was a worthwhile effort. But if we have this report in real time, it'll be much easier to increase the completion rates.
If you want to get a really quick snapshot, I'll send this link to you all as well so you can do a deeper dive. But this is a FAFSA website where you can query it by state. It will tell you exactly, and again, when you're talking about real time, there are some variances here that you can deal with, and so it will break these down by completions. It'll actually give us the high schools. If I clicked on this report, it'll expand it and tell me which schools in Kentucky. So this is the data analysis that you're talking about, but again, it does not, and so I can sort this by Fayette and filter it, et cetera, without us spending our time doing this. I'll send this to you so you can play around with it. It'll dig you right down to Bryan Station High School, Lafayette High School, and tell you completions submitted. Now, again, it gets really hairy because some of the students are pulled for verification, and you don't see all that, and you don't get the compelling why were they. So this is a good overview, but deeper analysis comes when you get boots on the ground like Kate and her team that knows our schools and knows the year demographics. But I'll send this link to you.
I realize this is a new initiative, and so you may not have an answer to this, but is there any plan for reaching out to foster kids or refugees?
Foster kids do it.
Foster kids do it?
It's not new either. We've been doing
Yeah,
it.
but foster kids almost like 100%. I mean, I've never had a foster kid not do it. Like, because like
So
someone
it's
in the
systematized.
school has always grabbed them and gotten them, and their social workers have gotten them, and I've gotten them. Like, they're like tired of it by the time it gets to them.
That's great to hear.
I think that.
They know how to, yet another thing they know how to do that their peers might not.
Right, and they also, like, when you go to the McKinley-Vento and those kids, they don't have the barriers to of the income, like, they don't have income or they don't have, so they can get it done a little faster because they don't actually have some information to put in some of those that they would need from parents.
Okay, and what about for refugee families who may not be as sort of literate and have access to information about that? Is there
Those are ones we still reach out to. I've reached out directly to the classes before, and I'd work with those students one-on-one. And if there was a question I couldn't answer, then I would reach out to Trey Sims, he's an excellent partner. He is available almost all the time to answer any question. I mean, it can't be like real time if he's doing a workshop somewhere else, but you can ask him anything, and he'll get back to you within the
Trey
day.
is with the Kentucky Higher Education Assistance Authority.
Thank you.
Will there be any tracking? So once the students or the parents show up for that one-time workshop, will you all be like taking names so you know who showed up, so there can be continued follow-ups, or will y'all be tracking that? You can continue to follow up with that family or with that student to make sure the steps are completed?
Well, I mean, the hope is that they would be able to finish it that workshop, but we do have them signing up. My school is using Eventbrite for the tickets for those different workshops. So we're limiting it to 4 families per like 30-minute session so that we can maintain confidentiality, because there's certain things that you're discussing that maybe you don't want other people to hear.
And again, you then reach this threshold called FERPA, where we as assistants to the students, it becomes the parent and the student, and even the student actually, because at that point the student can emancipate themselves and they have to opt their parents into that part of the information. It gets really complex, and a lot of parents don't realize it, that once the student completes their FAFSA process, they have to be given access and rights to even view that. So the pool shrinks down when it comes to access and opportunity, particularly when it becomes to socioeconomics, because of the trust factors. And you get DACA and you get all this other stuff where it becomes even more complex because the system becomes less reliable. And so that's where we're trying to mitigate some of that to help those parents and those students get past those trust factors when it comes to completing FAFSA.
So Louisiana and Texas have passed laws that require it to graduate. You have to fill out a FAFSA to graduate, and Illinois is about to do the same thing. It's a $120 billion pool every year, and you don't have access to it unless you fill out the FAFSA. Know anything about what's happening in Frankfurt to that end? Have we?
That's what Will Nash thinks this group will be very skilled at doing, is researching that.
That's how this all started.
It was like a lob, and then you spiked it back.
There you go. There you go. Well, any further questions? I'm looking at the time and trying to be mindful. It's 8 o'clock.
I just want to jump in real fast and say this is like a great example though of how. So Will had this idea in like August, and he wanted it on the August board meeting. So he comes to me, and the August board meeting, planning meeting. We had something we had something that night so and the superintendent was out, and I said, no, Will, we're not going to put it on this one, but we'll put it on September. And that's when he loops in with everybody, and he did the right thing. He came to me and the superintendent, me to get it on the agenda, the superintendent, because that's our employee, and then the superintendent linked in the right people who are sitting here, and then Will gave a presentation at that planning committee, and then kick the ball down to here and to you. And so this is like the perfect example of how this is really supposed to work.
Yep.
So let's keep the ball moving towards the line.
Well, thanks for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you
Thank
for the
you.
presentation. And thanks for the work that you're doing. All right. Still under subcommittee reports, no one on there, but we'll open the floor. I do know there's a report to be given by, is it Gifted and Talented?
Nope, not.
Excellent school. There you go. And so we basically will tag that on to the committee, and we'll open the floor for that committee report.
I'm on that committee, so I'll move to sit with them.
Okay.
We brought some information to share with you guys, if
All
that's
right.
okay. Well, I've got 2 stacks here, so.
2 hands.
And then we got all this.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Miranda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
All right, I'm Gretchen Vaught, and I am a parent. I've got, you can set it right there. I've got a little object lesson for you. I have an 80th percentile student who is unmotivated and happy with bringing home Ds. I have a gifted and talented student identified top 4%. I've got an average student, runs in the 50th percentile at every testing he goes through. And I have a student with an IEP in my house, and they attend 3 different Fayette County schools. Introduce yourself.
So I'm Markanti McCormick. I've been briefly on the Equity Council, and then I realized I wasn't qualified to be there. However, my interest has continued to be in improving the gaps, in achievement gaps between the students who are excellent, gifted, talented, and then the students with at risk. So I continue to come for these meetings.
So we've had about, really about 5 different people. One person had to leave, and Shurika is also on our subcommittee. And Kim is taking over at the helm of our subcommittee due to Daniel's resignation. Do you want to say?
Sure, you all have met me. I'm Kim Thompson. I'm also a parent, and before I was part of the Equity Council proper, I was on this wonderful subcommittee for almost 2 years. I'm foremost a parent. I have 4 students in Fayette County Public Schools who also fall into many of these gap areas that we have, our attention has been drawn toward. So I have a real passion for trying to give voice to these populations of students. Right now, we're focusing on the students who fall in special needs, English language learners, African American, at risk. And we just want to, before Gretchen talks any further, we really want to make sure that we get across that the plan that we're proposing really aligns perfectly with the charge to the district as a whole. In his press release today, Superintendent Kalk said, we're continuously asking ourselves, how are we doing on delivering on our promise of ensuring all students achieve at high levels and graduate prepared to excel in a global society. So while we celebrate where we've closed some of these gaps, we still see, especially when we break down and look at the individual schools, that there's still so many of these students who are in these gaps who don't have a voice. And we think we have a really fantastic idea that is free, that can really make an impact, and will also align with the standards of practice that we are charged with as an Equity Council, namely to maintain an unwavering focus on the achievement of all students regardless of race, gender identity, socioeconomic status, special need, or English language proficiency, among others.
Thank you. So for purposes of the video and for people who will be watching this later, I want to read what you have in your packet. I want to emphasize that what we've put together in your packet is stuff that you know. I know you already know this, so I don't want to insult your intelligence, but this is really the kind of summary data that over the year and a half that we've been working together, that we've pulled together to come up with this recommendation. So just want to ensure that you know that we've looked at this from a bunch of different angles. We've consulted experts. We've reached out to people who we know things better than we do about certain populations. And so that's really what we've tried to provide for you today.
And excuse me, just for clarification, you say you want to read the packet? Which,
No. I'm
Oh,
going to
just
read something from my agenda.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. All right.
No,
Don't worry.
not I've got kids at home. I'm not interested in
I
being here
gotcha,
all night,
okay.
even though you people look really, really nice. So our charge was, we shall be assembled in adherence to the FCPS Equity Council special meeting section of its bylaws and align with FCPS strategic plan's goal to provide every student in every grade with rigorous curriculum, strong instruction, and aligned assessments in core subjects. Within your packet, there is the overview from Pritchard Committee, which shows the gaps that our guest earlier spoke to in the STAR rating system, where students who are English language learners and students who are have IEPs and 504 plans are lagging tremendously in achievement, academic achievement, and yet they're still graduating. So that part should be alarming, that these students are really going out into the world not prepared, probably less prepared even than some of our other students who don't have these barriers. So we saw also in the packet that our guests presented that over the past 2 years, Fayette County has spent $12.1 million to provide a high-quality reading and math curriculum. And for the 4th consecutive year, the district has hired more teachers to work with students who have special needs and students who have been identified as gifted and talented. These are great things, but we still have students who are missing out. And through our research, we've identified a program that has been piloted in Jefferson County schools by the Human Development Institute at UK. There is research in your packet that shows that this model, thank you, benefits both students. It was piloted for students with IEPs, but that there were benefits in academic achievement for students who have these learning barriers and difficulties, as well as the students who are part of this dynamic. These dynamics are called peer support arrangements and peer networks. And the peer support arrangement is an in-classroom learning model where peers help to take on some of the learning components. It eliminates the need for extra staff. It helps to build social connections within the classroom. And those social connections are fostered ideally through the second component of this model, which is the peer networks. And the peer networks it's a social dynamic that is monitored by a staff member, but not at all guided by a staff member. And it's very, very important that the model is executed in a certain way so that the students really take on leadership capabilities, both with their peers in the classroom and in this social model. The goals of this program really, again, are to close the academic gaps. But also through the research brief, which you can read, HDI found that these students who went through this program for, I think it was either 2 or 3 years, then went on this was piloted in middle school, and then they went on to high school, and the transition to high school was much more successful for these students with disabilities because those social connections were so strong. And if you could project out further, this was relatively recent. I'm not remembering the years that it was done, but it was within the last 5 years, I believe. And so these students are still in school, so they haven't graduated yet. But as people who, we understand developmental stages of youth, these social connections that these kids are making are going to help them when they get out of high school as well. Because the students that have made these connections now understand their peers with disabilities, such that they're going to be their bosses, they're going to be their coworkers, they're going to be the ones to take them under their arms when they go to college and say, yeah, you can do this, let me help you, or can you help me? Because it's a two-way learning, it's not just a top-down learning model. In mentioning the top-down learning model, I want to point out that there is a third dynamic for peer-to-peer mentoring, and that's called peer tutoring. Also a fantastic program, greatly needed and in place at many of our schools. However, peer tutoring is definitely a top performer, a higher performer, working to bring up a lower performer. Whereas the peer-to-peer model is much more balanced, or they're both learning from each other.
And I just want to add that the peer tutoring is really done by a student who is at a higher level, higher class, not the same classroom. So, and it's in a different environment, maybe like a contained classroom or a resource classroom, where the leader from another class comes and tutors. This particular one is where all the children are together, learning the same material together in a shared attempt.
And the expectations for the student with a disability maybe the homework is slightly modified, or the learning model is slightly modified to use certain tools and resources or supports in the classroom to help that student achieve, but the expectations are the same, that the material is the same.
Can I interject also?
Yes, please.
Because this came up earlier, talking about those star ratings and where some schools dropped in their star rating. Often you see the population targeted are these populations that we're addressing, that we've been charged to study and see where we can help, improve equitable access to education and success. And it really isn't fair when you, obviously we are all proponents of integration, right? So when you take a minority population and you put it into the general population, it really isn't fair not to also nurture these networks of support, because the other, who is teaching them how to relate to these other kids? We'll create, I think, bigger barriers if we don't have very proactive and positive programs that help educate the other population about the minority population and how they can be engaged in helping them to close that gap. And the data that you see here in your packet from HDI shows how that gap is closed by this program. That's really simple.
Yeah, and I think just to be clear about what we're suggesting here, this program was piloted for students with IEPs. But we believe that from reading the research brief and the outcomes that we're seeing, that could even be a benefit to some of these other at-risk populations. I was noticing on our earlier guest's presentation that 9 schools lost a star due to achievement gaps. And it was predominantly disabilities. And there was also some of the high schools were from the African-American population as well, which is, when you think about the socioeconomic barriers that are often in place for people of color and people who are immigrants. And I mean, there's such a huge component that I believe the social connections that we sometimes forget about when we're looking for tools and resources and we're thinking about adding great teachers. Sometimes we maybe undervalue that, but it's so important to developing students, especially in the middle school age, where, I mean, it's hard enough for any typical middle schooler to do well. I want you to maybe mention.
Well, the last point about this study is that actually it was presented to the legislation, and both houses unanimously approved that this program be implemented throughout the state of Kentucky. But we tried to get data from Fayette County, and there's not one school that had opted, because we were trying to get data. We were trying to see how many schools opted to do this, and let's see how they have fared. And so that was rather disappointing information, for something that had been studied, that had gone all the way up to the legislation and had been approved. And it is without cost. There are people who are provided, who are being paid by the state to train any school that wants to implement this model.
Through the co-ops, actually.
And it basically says it's an inclusion model. It's inclusive in this way.
Right, and it's been proven to improve academic and social achievement of these target students.
So before we go any further with our presentation, I'm doing a little object lesson for you tonight. Do we have any nut allergies?
I was waiting on that.
Do we have any nut allergies?
You mean the edible nut?
So you have a nut allergy, don't you? Oh, you're gonna hold it? Okay. We aim to be
I've got a
memorable.
fat allergy.
These are calorie-free cookies.
Oh, I'll take 5 of them now.
It seems like Shark Tank, and we're now about to ask for a percentage. Down here.
Like for everyone who does not have a nut allergy, to try the lighter colored cookie.
Do I get one?
You may. Yeah.
It really excites the palate instantly when it
Impossible.
pairs
Try
well
the
with a
lighter
nice
colored cookie.
Yeah.
bottle of Pepsi.
And hopefully it's terrible.
It's good.
And then try the other cookie. But you gotta kind of take a big old bite, you know, like you're a little kid, just happy about the cookies.
That's the one that's homemade.
They both are, actually. But the difference is that the lighter colored cookie, we left out the sugar.
Yeah.
There's your fewer calories. We also changed out the macadamia nuts, so they're chickpeas.
Oh, I didn't even
Oh, I'm
know the
allergic to
difference.
chickpeas.
So my point there is really, you know, if you think of sugar as being like the social glue that holds our kids' lives together, I mean, that's all they care about. I've got a teenager and an almost teenager. Like, come on, you know? And then the chickpeas. We can do something similar to the in-classroom learning, but inclusive classrooms, there's no substitute for it. You can't change the recipe and expect to get the same result. Thank you. Do you have any questions that we can answer?
So we are going to make a recommendation.
Yes. So our closing request, which you have in your packet also, is that we would really love for you to recommend to the school board that we identify a middle school with the greatest gap performance for our target kids at which we could pilot this program and study its success over 3 years and compare that with the performance of this target group at another school. Our earlier guest did say that it takes 3 to 5 years to see success, so that was what we were going to ask anyway. And our more formal recommendation is on the back, which I won't read to you, but I know Daniel, I believe, submitted that on our behalf. I hope that you have a copy of it as well. So we've been collecting this data for 1.5 years, and any of us would love to answer any questions that you have about any of this that we've learned. And thank you for your time and patience.
Thank you.
So I have a quick question. Just, and it may give you or you. So I am a big fan of this in an interesting way. One of my children went to Lexington Hearing and Speech, which has typicals and non-typicals, and they all integrate together. And then this weird cluster, all 6 of them ended up in the same kindergarten class. And we are now several years through, and I think there's 5 of them still together. So it's been very interesting to see this crew of typicals and non-typicals that started at 1 and have written. So that's interesting. But my question is this doable with FERPA? Like, that is my question.
What is the question? I'm sorry.
I mean, I get that Jefferson County is doing it, but how do you get around FERPA?
FERPA, can you tell us what that means?
So FERPA is like HIPAA of education is the way I describe it.
Oh, you're
best.
talking about, yes, okay.
So like, how do you, because if a child has a disability, it might be a silent disability or, how do you get, do they opt in to be part of this, or how do we?
Well, the teacher has the, and I understand HIPAA because I do benefits communications for a living, so I'm all about it. But, so a teacher has all of the students in her classroom or his classroom their IEPs and their 504 plans. And so the teacher's going to know, and the teacher would be able to, I mean, kids
But when
do.
the teacher pairs that child with another child, now that child knows that that child has.
No, that's not the way the model works. It's intended to be co-learning.
Okay.
So so it's that, I
That's
think
taken
that's
into account is basically an answer
Yeah.
to that question. If you look at it a little closer.
Okay.
So would they be a team for the whole academic year? That module, I mean, that little
I think
group of
that that's the
kids?
way
That's the way, yes.
Be like a
so-
little
and-
family going through the school year together?
in certain classes,
Uh-huh,
right?
right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
right.
And also, we hope that you would include at-risk children. That is the whole goal, because we don't think that it is, this model should work for everyone who's at risk. And it's perfect, and it improves social connections.
The research brief actually says that there were students who were moderate performers. So maybe your C average students, maybe they had some challenges in the home or something along those lines. And that their performance was raised as well as a result of this dynamic. Because if you can teach something, or you can help someone else learn something,
You're doing
then
better.
you're doing better yourself.
Right now, when you look from the outside and you're not in that disability group or African-American group, and you see, oh, this school was a 4, but it's now a 3, and why? It's like you're casting blame. I know that's not anyone's intention, but it's labeling those groups, oh, it's their fault, so we're okay except for that. But when you require of a middle school or, whatever school you do this at, and we're requesting middle school for many reasons, but when you require, you say to the school community, we are investing in the success of all students, we're forming networks, everyone's going to be blinded to each other's achievement, it becomes much more equitable. There's no blame. Everyone's trying to lift each other up. And it's really designed in a way to respect privacy, and students benefit from each other. The ones who are academically strong get stronger because they have to teach more. The social bonds are formed, and we just really hope that you guys can examine this and come back to us, on some kind of timeline. We've worked very hard over a year and a half to try to come up with some product, from deliberating with our committee for a long time.
Well, I
So
wanna-
have there been other school districts that have tried this, adopted it, and had results that show?
So
What
as I
you're
said,
looking
it
for.
was
Out-
Jefferson County, the most recent.
Yeah, outside of, because they just started. I'm just talking maybe some years back that shows.
So the
That it's been
history of the
working for 3 or 4
program
years.
is that HDI got a grant, I think about 5 years ago, to implement this and to pilot it, and did so in Jefferson County schools. Since then, the joint resolution's been passed, and the administration and implementation of these programs has been turned over to the co-ops. And the co-ops are currently working with Danville Independent Schools to implement it currently with them, but they're the only ones that have taken this up. And so that's why we're here, is to say, hey, can we try this in Fayette County? Let's not do it district-wide, that would be, boiling the ocean. But could we find a school that we can see if this will work for our students too?
What would be the next steps?
I think that the best thing to do would be to have somebody from the co-op come in. We've met with co-op, what's her name?
Sally Miracle.
Yes, thank you. Just blanking.
I read it.
Okay, so, so I've seen her presentation. They have she said that when the school brings them in, they are fully invested in the success of the program at that school. So they really partner very closely with all the teachers and everybody and the administrators that are involved to make it successful. One thing that I've heard in meeting, I actually went along with her to present it to a Beaumont Middle School. One of my friends was interested in it and had brought it to the attention of Beaumont. I went along and I listened to the presentation. And a lot of the pushback that I've heard both from there and other places when I've talked to teachers, and I tried to be my own little cheerleader to be like, hey, could you do this at a school that I talked to somebody? And the pushback that we often get is, well, it's just one more thing. Well, it's just, we've already got this going, we've already got that going, it's a lot. And if you read the research brief, the initial implementation takes a little getting used to because there's some scheduling things that have to be ironed out. But once the program gets flowing, the respondents to the survey said that it actually flowed very smoothly. It just took them a little while to
I
get.
would say this would work beautifully in a co-teaching environment because there's already another
is
teacher
correct.
in there.
That is correct.
And I want to applaud you for the research that you've done, and you did a very nice presentation as well.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
And I want to echo that. Thank you all for your
Cookies.
tenacity. I'm not a big cookie eater, so 2 years ago I would have asked for the whole batch, but changing lifestyle. But this is how this group is supposed to work. It warms my heart to see that we get to this place and you bring such a formal, shareable recommendation that we can. If Ms. Spires wasn't sitting here, we have a transition point that I could have taken this document and shared it with the Board of Education. I didn't do an equity report every month. In that report, it's covering a whole lot of different things across the district, so it's not the same thing every month. But what I do every month and every week is meet with the superintendent and all of our district leadership teams. And once a month, we meet with our district leadership, which is our principals. So when you look at schools and programs, you have to find integration points. That's what, regardless of the fact the state government decided to do a joint resolution, decentralization in 1990, which the legislators also put in place, said that you can't force these programs and curriculum into schools by the way of the Board of Education. You have to do it through your school-based decision-making councils. And that's why you don't see it system-wide and school-wide. So you now have to find integration points. And so what I would recommend when I go back on Thursday is I'll give an overview to our district leadership team, which we call Executive ELT, about your presentation. What I will probably recommend is that we get you and the co-op before our school principals, which we meet every month, so that you can present that as a whole to every principal in the district. That will give you an opportunity to be heard by every single leader. Then they have the opportunity to take it back to their school councils, place it on their agendas, and then you go from there. Again, I applaud the work because it's evidence-based and research-based, and it's in a format that it does not require this group a whole lot of deeper dive. Your compelling why is there. The evidence for why you did what you did in the research is that you've got your body of work behind it that supports it. So all that being said, we are where we are. The fact that I'm the only one at the table that works for the district. And knowing that, I know where those integration points are. So I'll do my due diligence to ensure that I get you before the right group so that you can at least be heard further into the district and have this information shared. Again, it's left up to each school whether or not they adopt it. We'll mention that the district has looked to purchase social emotional learning. So we know that is a key component to the whole child, not just the academic part. And that's work that we've done through our strategic plan this year, was by SEL curriculum, so that we can introduce that part of learning. We do have some co-teaching models that Amanda Dennis has rolled out through her framework, so it may fit into theirs, particularly through SPED, special education. So you'll get a chance to meet them and talk to them, so I'll do my part and we'll be in touch with you.
And that's the same thing too, though, the social emotional learning curriculum is that each school individually
Each school has to adopt it, yes.
So that's where my question is. Why is it that we can study this, we can go back there and talk to the principals and all of that, but how difficult would it be to make the commitment? I'm just asking for my own information. How difficult is it to make the commitment to say, this is worth implementing? God knows we have implemented all sorts of programs and found some of them don't work. I understand that. But what would it take to do that? If it has already been studied at the state legislature level and been approved.
Seems to me that if you want to do in middle school, that it would be more beneficial to them to just meet with maybe the director of middle schools, and maybe she could recommend us one of the principals that would be amenable to this because she probably knows them all. And then maybe they could make a direct connection to principals and site-based councils.
If you
Would that work?
do it to all of the principals, you might have 3 pick it up.
And that's, so I work from an AKA perspective, which is
Elementary
all
schools,
knows
they don't
all.
pick it up. They
Um,
tend to be more.
The more voices you can have hearing the same message at once is probably most effective than picking and choosing. From my seat, having worked in the district, if I could get you before an audience of 66 versus an audience of 1, your compelling why is spread that more, the opportunity to have it done. Not that that's not a great idea, because again, our executive leadership team includes all the chiefs of elementary, all the chiefs of middle, and the single chief for high school. So if you want to drill down, it's like throwing a dart in the dark, and you're eventually going to hit one of the 66. Somebody may say, "I'd love this," and at the elementary level and not at the middle school level. The earlier we get that model, the better we can see it probably matriculate across the other
Well, we
levels.
see that it happens more naturally in elementary. So that's why we were really, because middle school is just so hard anyway. And that's where the biggest
And we
gaps
see that,
were.
right,
So
in the
you're
data.
building on, like if students, we all know, if they don't do well in elementary school, if they don't do, that's why early intervention is so important, right? If they don't do well then, they're gonna have trouble all the way through. We get that. But middle school is the biggest, hormonal, developmental, academic, everything just happens there. They go from a school with 750 kids to 1,500 kids. I mean, it's just so much.
And I think I heard you say you wanted to do a longitudinal study over 2 or 3 years, and specifically in middle school.
It takes about 3 to 5 years for us to see.
I mean, a comparison between the
Ideally,
schools
yes.
right now that are identified as having a gap in disabled students, and then take one of those schools and then compare it to another school to
yes.
see if it had an impact, perhaps.
That is correct, and we can carve it any which way. Once we accept that this is something worth pursuing, then we can say, okay, we'll take more than one school. It doesn't matter, because we believe in this model, but we would like for us all to believe in it. So you're correct. We're simply saying, consider one school, but maybe we might have more than one.
And did you say that the state will actually provide the training and all
Yes.
the resources?
Yes.
Through the.
Well, and I mean,
seem like a win-win.
Okay,
there's a lot of, and we all know that there's a lot of enthusiasm that's conveyed from someone who has connections, such as yourself, such as all of you, to different people. Hey, we heard about this presentation. You might want to look into this. I know they have to make their own decision. We were really trying to come here so we didn't have to go to all the different schools individually. I don't have that kind of time. But also, in closing, I know we all want to go home, but can I just say that I went to journalism school. I know about PR. This could be an amazing win. This could be an amazing story. I will write the press release for you. I would love, and I don't want any glory. This is not why I'm here. I have 4 kids in this district, and I really respect our teachers and our principals. I'm not just blowing smoke. I don't say things I don't mean. So thank you for having us, and we all would love to see this have a future.
Thank you all.
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you. All
And we
right.
have lots more of the good cookies.
Bad cookies were good, I thought.
Okay, it's getting pretty late. Bless you.
But isn't
A-
Sarah,
Any others that want to do I'm sorry?
isn't Sarah here from the?
She's here just
Observing.
looking.
Okay.
Yes, just observing. Anyone else, committee-wise? I have to ask, but I'm a little afraid to ask, but I have to ask. No, but we've heard 3 great presentations, I believe, this evening. So take some time and go back and read through this. I know I plan to do so. Thanks for offering up, Mr. Thomas, to have them get in front of the principals, and we'll see where that goes. Other communication, anything?
I have a request.
Yes.
How difficult is it for us to get the minutes to this meeting prior to the next meeting? So that we have time to read them?
I'll tell you, depends on my schedule, because I don't have an administrative support specialist, and I'm one only equity officer. So if that's a request that you want, I will make sure you get it.
Thank you.
So you asked me how difficult, though. Right?
Very.
So I will get this, I have this little juggling act I play with how I get this done, so I'll juggle it. You
I
tell
thought
me
there
if
was
you,
somebody that transcribes this.
but it's not, it's a little juggling act I have
Okay,
to, they're not, I don't have a
His name is
dedicated,
Daryl Thompson.
look, so I'll make it happen.
At 2 to 3 in the morning. when you-
I'll make it happen for you, all right?
Thank you.
In between time, in the meantime, all right?
All right. Anything else?
I thought Miranda, when I saw Miranda here from the Family Community Leadership or Community Partner Leadership Team, I thought she was going to talk about the Million Word Challenge and some other stuff. There's lots of good stuff that the CPLT is doing.
Yeah, we'll bring that back. We've got a collective impact model they're working on, particularly as it fits into the conversation we've had. We talked about all of this stuff, and now we're looking at how, and I did a presentation to you all last year maybe on where children live. Does where children live matter? All right? And so we're going back to that because when you look at our 7 schools and even the one that did not lose its CSI status, you look at the socioeconomic footprint that it sits in, all 7 of them had the same single thread, all right?
6 connect geographically.
And so the same single thread, even though it skipped and went around the geography, it landed with the same thread in that other school, which was Mill Creek, really on the south side. And so knowing that, we want to look at what can the community do from a collective impact standpoint. United Way to Bluegrass is actually redoing its business model around this conversation, and what can we do to help support schools from the outside in versus pushing in the schools trying to push out into the community. What can we do from a community standpoint? So that's a conversation you're going to continue to hear us talk about. Partnerships like that, what can we do to drive change? Because again, poverty has a large impact on learning. Not that you can't learn, but it creates these barriers, and how can we mitigate those? So that's some stuff you'll hear us talking about going forward. But I appreciate you all's attendance. I mean, this is a great group. Please complete an application for re-election. I will get that posted, and I'll send you all a couple of links from our conversation tonight. Try to get those minutes to you at least 2 weeks prior to the meeting.
Or just a few days.
I'm gonna go. I got it. Look,
I
you
wouldn't
challenged
put
me.
any
I got
pressure.
it. Look, I'm gonna just stay up all night tonight and do it tonight. Look.
I love you all, but we are about to shut this down here right now. I'm skipping to adjournment, matter of fact, right now. No.
A motion from Craig.
All right.
I move, yeah, second.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the meeting. Appreciate it.